Hello, everyone. Welcome to our book study group for Monday, the 15th of August. John Lavenia here with you. This is brought to you by the JL Success Mastermind. And I do have my buddy Bob and Daisy and Lindsay here with me. If you're tuning in on YouTube, then feel free to leave a comment in the chat. Of course, you could also go to jlsuccessmastermind.com if you'd like to grab yourself a membership. That being said, tonight we are talking about chapters 19, 20, 21, 22. Right. So parts 5 and 6 out of the book. So it's interesting how he kind of laid this book out in parts, and those parts have one or more chapters in each part. So let's get right into it. Let's do this. Where's my, I don't know my controls here. Come on, damn it. Here's my controls. All right. So part 5, the perfect way to conquer worry. So we've already been through quite a bit of this book. All right. So part 1, fundamental facts you should know about worry, basic techniques in analyzing worry, how to break the worry habit before it breaks you. And then last week we concluded with 7 ways to cultivate a mental attitude that will bring you peace and happiness. So I thought we were getting more into the start living portion of the book. A lot of it's been about stop worrying. And some of the chapters here in this section, we're definitely going more in the direction of where you want to go. But now we're back to worrying. So the perfect way to conquer worry, and which is just this chapter 19. Hopefully you've all read this, How My Mother and Father Conquered Worry, essentially. And I'm very interested to hear your all thoughts about this. But essentially what he's talking about here is turning to faith and religion as the perfect way to conquer worry. So now I know in modern times, a lot of times people have, well, and this is a generality, but we see a lot of people, I guess, in pop culture that kind of invalidate religion or faith. And then on the other hand, there's plenty of faithful people as well. Perhaps it's just some of the narrative that I've been exposed to lately sort of invalidates religious people, or people who are devoted to and who follow or worship a power greater than themselves, realizing that they're not the greatest thing in the that ever happened in the universe per se, right? So a couple of highlights in this chapter. I didn't highlight a whole lot. But he talked about how his mother and father were, very poor. They lost money year after year with the farm, and the pigs died, and the blight or whatever came across, and then the flood, right? So I'll tell you one thing, I've earned some respect, or I've learned some respect for farmers. Just planting my garden boxes, it was like, wow, there's Lindsay, you already heard the story, right? So here's these, 8 foot by 4 foot by 2 foot deep boxes. We assembled the boxes. We got the proper kind of soil. We're planting the seeds. We're doing the thing, the water, the irrigation, and just now I was shoveling by hand. Okay, I know farmers have tools, equipment, training, right? A crew typically. So here I was out there with the shovel, but just drenched and filthy head to toe. And I thought, wow, this is a bunch of work to, grow some lettuce. Yeah. Anyway, it didn't even work out for these guys. They were going to lose it all. But the thing that kept it together for his mother in particular was that she was a praying woman. William James said, of course, the sovereign cure for worry is religious faith. So I thought that was interesting how he used sovereign in that sentence. But the memories that Dale had of his mother singing while she worked, right? Things that affirm her faith and trust in this higher power. That's what stuck with him after he had sort of exited that world, considering himself perhaps an agnostic or questioning, all of it, and then coming back to it. It was like an awakening for him. Here's the parts that I kind of and again, I'm going to open this up for discussion, but I'm not sure about this here. Do I profess to know the answers to all these questions now? No. No man has ever been able to explain the mystery of the universe, the mystery of life. We are surrounded by mysteries. He goes on. All right. So I put that in orange there because, well, there's been a lot of things, and perhaps this book was a little bit early on the scene, but there's been a lot of things to explain the scientific nature, if we want to get into science, whether we're talking quantum physics and different things where we could see potentiality versus matter, right? But there's been a lot discovered about this physical universe of matter, energy, space, and time since this book came out. So I wouldn't take this as an eternal answer or an eternal truth here. Now, there's been a lot of mysteries that have been explained. And personally, I like to not live in a state of mystery. I like to know stuff. Okay. Now, does that come at the cost of, I can't have just faith? Well, no, but I think it's fine to also have evidence and knowing this. So perhaps a blind faith is not what I'm interested in. A blind faith. How about an eyes wide open faith? Is that possible? I think so. Right here, and this is the other thing. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? He's talking about mysteries here. General Motors research laboratories have spent years of time and millions of dollars trying to find out how and why a spark in the cylinder sets off an explosion that makes your car run. They don't know the answer. Poppycock. They engineered this stuff. I mean, they know why it works, right? You got an air fuel mixture under compression. Here comes a spark. It ignites the flame front, and heat expands and it pushes the piston down. The crankshaft turns. I've got a mechanical background, so I know this stuff. But certainly General Motors knows this stuff. So I'm baffled with this assertion that he's making here, that General Motors doesn't know why a spark plug makes your car run. Everybody knows. Anyway, moving on, it says here, I no longer have the faintest interest in the differences in creeds that divide the churches. I totally relate to this. We've quoted here in this group, we've quoted from Buddhist scripture, Hindu, Christian scripture, of course, and on and on. Okay. And what I look for is workability. So here, he's saying, well, different creeds divide the church. Okay, I mean, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't work. But I'm tremendously interested in what religion does for me. There's the workability piece. Just as I'm interested in what electricity and good food and water do for me. So in that way, we see it as an asset, even if we aren't as interested in the labels about it. Somewhere else in this chapter, I don't think I highlighted it, he talked about how the person who, even if they don't intellectually, subscribe to this or that, scripture, they may be more of a quote Christian than, someone else who, has lots of words about it, but does not demonstrate. So I thought that was interesting. It was more of a pragmatic approach to religion, or what I would call spirituality. So it says here, he's talking about this hymn. As I listened to that hymn, I realized that I had made a tragic mistake. This is a woman who was thinking about taking her life and that of her daughter. But then she heard the hymn. I made a tragic mistake. I had tried to fight all my terrible battles alone. Here it is. Fight my terrible battles alone. I had not taken everything to God in prayer. I jumped up, turned off the gas, opened the door, and raised the window. So here she was about to murder her daughter and herself in a state of despair, attempting to fight all her terrible battles alone for however long. And I can tell you that every great advancement I've experienced in life has come via the catalyst of another or others. So to try and do everything alone, especially something that's very heavy duty, I think is folly, right? Especially problems that affect groups have to be addressed by groups. So problems that affect our spirit have to be discerned and addressed spiritually. That's something I heard from, I'm paraphrasing now, but a guy named Joel Goldsmith, who was considered by many to be like a modern day apostle. He wrote A Parentheses in Eternity. He wrote The Infinite Way. But one of the things he said is that spiritual scripture must be discerned spiritually, not intellectually. So there's, again, it's a different perspective. It's a higher perspective. And it's one where you're not alone. A couple other things, and I do think he kind of dragged on with this chapter. But William James, again, he says approximately the same thing. Faith is one of the forces by which men live. And the total absence of it means collapse. So back to modern pop culture, debauchery, a lot of the things, I won't go into details right now, but a lot of things we see going on in the educational system and the indoctrination or grooming of children and all this. Societal collapse. That's the result of godless living. I mean, if we look at right here in the United States, right, this whole idea of a self-governing, by the people, for the people, right, that whole idea is predicated on the existence of a moral citizenry, right, and an average IQ of at least 100, right, and you get down below that, it comes apart too. But there's got to be a moral base. I've heard it said that when the mores of society are insufficient, then laws don't work. But when the mores of society are sufficient, laws aren't needed. Do what you want with that. But I think the foundation of morality, and he's talking about faith here, William James is, but a foundation of, we could say, ethics, principles, and all that is necessary for a workable civilization. What is a civilization? It's the highest advancement of mankind, right? There's barbarism, right? And then I guess tribalism, right? And civilization, right, would be the highest, form of people living together and being civil. We have to have foundations for that. Moving on, there are no atheists in the foxholes. But why wait till we are desperate? So you see right here, he's giving us practical advice. Okay, so you can wait till your back is right against the wall and then, oh God, help me, right? Reminds me of that first album by Black Sabbath. First song, first album, Black Sabbath, right? Here's Ozzy Osbourne. Oh no, please God help me. I'm like, all right, is that where we need to get to with all this? I hope not. Why not renew our strength every day? Why wait even till Sunday? Why? All right. So if this is something workable, well then work it. And the only time you can work it is present time. Well, then do that then. Right. So something that Paul talked about in the Bible, and I'm sure Bob knows more about it than me, but the idea of praying without ceasing. Prayer without ceasing. In other words, these things of good report. Think on these things. When? Now. And now, and now, and now. And remember what was said. Right? I think he quoted Jesus in here. Here it is. Take no thought for your life. What you shall eat, what you shall drink. You guys have read this all for yourself. Very, very well-known section, right, out of the Bible. And here is the one line that, a lot of people quote more than any, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Right. So all this fretting about in, physical world matter considerations and, troubles, right? Take no thought for your life. Anyway, to wrap up, I think we're getting to the end of this chapter. I was born anew that desperate night 21 years ago in a little hotel in Amarillo, Texas. This was the guy who was failing at his sales, couldn't feed his family. My outward situation the next day was the same as it had been through weeks of failure. So his conditions hadn't changed outwardly, okay? But a tremendous thing happened inside me. I'd suddenly become aware of my relationship with God. A mere man alone can't easily be defeated, but a man alive with the power of God within him is invincible. I know. I saw it work in my own life. Ask and it shall be given you, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. So there's a quote again, in this case from the Sermon on the Mount, right? So this guy got what? He got inspired. What does inspired mean? In spirit. In spirit. He became spiritually awake more so than he was yesterday when he couldn't close a deal if his life depended on it. And now he closed everybody. Same offer, same customer list, same city, different guy. And this is why I say again and again and again, more important than what we do is who's doing it. Who's doing it? Who's doing it? That's what we got to know. And if the answer is me and the greatest ally anyone could ever have, well, that's a pretty good sales team. Is that it for this chapter? No, it's not. In prayer, human beings seek to augment their finite energy by addressing themselves to the infinite source of all energy. So there's that, we could say, kind of like a communion, all right? When we pray, we link ourselves with the inexhaustible motive power that spins the universe. So you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to, make the world turn. It's going to turn because of greater power than you. I think finally here, few men in their lifetime come anywhere near exhausting the resources dwelling within them. There are deep wells of strength that are never used. So I guess really what we're talking about then is tapping into that and just, more of that anyway. I've heard it said that, God's gift to us is more talent and ability than we can develop in this lifetime. Our gift to God is to develop it as much as we can in this lifetime and have that experience. Here's 3 steps or three reasons to actually follow what he's saying here. Number 1, prayer helps us put into words exactly what is troubling us. All right. So now we're not vague anymore and we're making that objectively known, right? So now I'm hearing the words or I'm writing the words or I'm seeing the words. And so I'm making that unvague. I'm not being vague about that. I'm confronting the issue, right? Number 2, prayer gives us a sense of sharing our burdens, of not being alone. Again, this is huge. This is huge. If you're all alone and, in a state of despair, you got to have allies. Okay. Number 3, prayer puts into force an active principle of doing. Doing is a first step toward action. So deliberately going in this direction is an action. That is a doingness. That is not just a consideration. It is an action. Fantastic, right? Because all of our answers come when we're in action, right? Not sitting around theorizing. So then take the action. And now you're unstopped. Unstopped. In other words, moving. And finally, I think we're done with that chapter. Who else has some thoughts on this chapter? I can't wait to hear what you guys think about this. Or why General Motors can't figure out why a spark plug ignites the combustion chamber. Hi, Bob.
Hello. Well, it should be no surprise on the many counts that I'm first in leading off here because this is a book I recommended. And let me just say, I had not read this book before.
Oh,
okay. This has been gathering dust on my bookshelf for about 15 years. And I had begun a foray into it, but I abandoned it. And then when I got involved with the book study, I thought I think this would tie in well. And I'm happy to say I think that it has. Secondly, because of my background, having aspired to be a priest at one time, I was very interested in what he had to say about this. Mm-hmm. Extremely interested. The thing about religion today is most people say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, because religion tends to be a list of thou shalt and thou shalt nots, and there are rules and things like that. People, particularly here in the United States, have become extremely individualistic, and they don't necessarily cotton to the idea that there have to be, certain rules and regulations that govern your behavior if you want to In the case of a Catholic, you want to save your soul. You want to get to the other side of the Jordan on the right side. You want to go to heaven. But, all right, today is August 15th in the Catholic calendar. It is the Feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Mother. It is a holy day of obligation. Missy and I just came back from Mass. Okay. This is a rule. This is a commandment of the church. You hear Mass on holy days and Sundays and holy days of obligation. All right. Now, to a lot of people says, why are you doing this? Okay. Why are you letting somebody else tell you what you need to do? All right. Well, I wouldn't do it on my own. So here is really a benefit of being part of an organized religion, no matter what it might be. If they give you rules of the road to follow, then you're going to do what is virtuous in spite of yourself, because someone else is telling you, you got to do this. I had an uncle who was a career Navy man. He was a convert. He converted to the faith when he married my aunt. And he likened life to a busy street. Okay. And you want to get to from one side of the street to the other. Well, obviously you can take your life into your own hands and just start walking. All right. But you never know who's going to come barreling down that road at 90 miles an hour and take you from this life to the next in an instant. Okay. You're better off pressing the button, waiting for the walk signal to come, and then walking at that time. And that's how he equated his entry into the church, was now he's part of an organization where there are definite rules of the road, things that you have to do. And therefore, if you aren't going to police yourself, by golly, we're going to police you for you. And a lot of people rebel against the notion of, well, I'm an independent individual. No one has to tell me what to do. I know what's best for me. Well, what's the upshot of that? You put your finger on it earlier. We have become effectively godless. We have people who say they're spiritual, but they don't believe in God. It's a really odd thing.
Mm.
They believe in a spiritual side of life, but they don't believe in God. They might believe in a vague force, the universe, whatever, okay, but they don't believe in God. Now, a few words about God, all right? God is the supreme being. He is, therefore, a person, okay? A person is a being that acts with reason. He does things for a purpose. There is nothing random. Einstein said this. There's nothing random. God does not play dice with the universe. So if you're connecting to a vague nebulous force, that's a whole lot different than connecting to another person. So the notion of God is far superior than the notion of a vague force, as far as I am concerned. And so I think a lot of people who are walking around there saying, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, are deluding themselves. All right. And the absence really of the personal God in our society, and you touched on this earlier, has kind of led us to where we are right now today. We have a lot of people who have some really crazy notions out there about what's going on. We're all trying to go it alone as a result, and we're living in chaos.
Mm.
When we talk about prayer, which is what this chapter is about, prayer is defined as the lifting of the heart and mind to God. Okay, you're talking to him, and true prayer, it's a dialogue. He talks to you. All right, and so we equate prayer with pouring out our troubles and cares and woes, and then expecting, some relief therefrom. Not necessarily going to happen that way. It's not necessarily going to happen that way. We have to be willing to listen as well. It's a communication. Communication requires that there be talk and listening. So I agree with you on the whole. When you talk about prayer, you're always going to be walking on eggshells. And I know that I'm probably, without intending to, offending maybe the sensibilities of some members of the group. But,
be my guest.
Okay. But I think he was absolutely right that when an individual seeking to be successful tries to go it alone, he's going to find himself pretty much unsuccessful. When the tide turns against him, it's going to be very difficult, very hard going.
Mm.
It's better to cultivate the idea of I am part of a universe that is governed by a supreme being who cares about me. And what does that do to your attitude? If you know that there's someone who really cares about you, who really wants only what's best for you, and all he asks in return is trust, why not? You're going to be happier and you're not going to worry. So
Mm.
that's my soapbox for tonight.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Bob. I knew that we would be enriched with your perspectives today, especially on this chapter. As you were talking, I was thinking of a lot of this postmodern relativism or humanism, which I just looked up. According to the dictionary, humanism is an outlook or system of thought attaching prime importance to human rather than divine or supernatural matters. Humanist beliefs stress the potential value and goodness of human beings, emphasize common human needs, and seek solely rational ways of solving human problems. Do you hear the gaping holes in that, Bob? Do you hear the huge gaping holes in that? So how easy is it to fall from that to nihilism? How short of a jump is it when we take God out? I've heard that law, in fact, this is Bob Proctor. He said, my favorite definition for law is the orderly movement of the omnipotent God. There's the definition of law. Because you were talking about order, right? There's purpose involved. It's not chaos. Anyway, you have some more comments on that.
Yeah, well, what you just spoke about reminded me a long time ago. There was a show that was briefly on public television. Steve Allen, who's one of the great giants of the early days of TV, and really quite a Renaissance man. He thought he would get historical figures from different eras to talk about a certain topic. And he got on the very first show, it's called Meeting of Minds. Unfortunately, you can't get it. It's not available anywhere. Had a brief run, very interesting, but he had St. Thomas Aquinas and Thomas Paine as two of the four individuals on the panel. And so Thomas Aquinas was expounding Catholic philosophy, and then Thomas Paine bursts into the room. Okay, he doesn't wait to be introduced, and he starts raking Thomas Aquinas over the coals because Thomas Paine was a free thinker. He was a deist. So Thomas Aquinas asked him, well, what is deism? He said, well, we believe in God, the watchmaker. Okay, we acknowledge his role in creation, but he does not intervene in human affairs. And Thomas Aquinas said, well, what obligations does this belief system have for you? And Thomas Paine said, that's a remarkably Catholic question, because it resonated with me, obviously, because of my background. Any organized religion, there are obligations. There are obligations that you have to meet in order to be a card-carrying member of that religion. And deism was the philosophy that animated most of our founding fathers. Jefferson was a deist. Franklin, to a large extent, was a deist. Paine, by admission, was a deist. And they acknowledged that God existed, but God really didn't care about humanity. He just put us here, and we were just sort of left to acknowledge him, but do nothing really more than that. And as wonderful a country as this is, a wonderful founding document as the Declaration and the Constitution are, there was that, as you put it, a gaping hole. Because deism is just a more palatable form, in my mind, of humanism as you defined it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and even Jefferson said, to form a more perfect union, right? So we're not already perfect. We're working on it, you know. So, and I mentioned nihilism before, just so I don't leave anyone with mysteries, because I don't like mysteries. Nihilism, noun, the rejection of all religious and moral principles. So it's not just religion, it's also moral principles. The rejection of, okay, in the belief that life is meaningless. Philosophy, extreme skepticism, maintaining that nothing in the world has a real existence. So now you can go do whatever you want, go murder people, whatever. None of this is real. You see, this is all this postmodern Marxist relativism, nihilism, which is running rampant through the world right now. Oh, this is interesting. Here's a historical definition. The doctrine of an extreme Russian Revolutionary Party circa 1900, which found nothing to approve of in the established social order. And of course, the etymology, early 19th century, from the Latin nihil, which means nothing, nothingism, basically. You lose, and everybody loses, right? That's what nihilism is. So, moving on to more cheerful chapters. I don't know if Lindsay or Daisy wanted to get in on this one. It was a pretty heavy-duty chapter and a really long one.
Well, I did want to kind of say something, kind of what Bob had said. It's, if you go all the way back to creation, I guess, you know, God created because he wanted a relationship, you know, and I think that's where truly where it all comes from. And of course, we know what happened in the Garden of Eden, right? The temptation, everything, but that, I think that's where it all goes, is that he wants a relationship with us. And there are obviously, you know, everything in life trying to separate that from us, with, you know, between that relationship between us and God. So that being, you know, with this chapter about prayer and everything, I think that just strengthens that. I think that is a true, I think that aligns with what is written here in the book, is that relationship. And I think when that starts to go south, or when you forget, or when you no longer believe, or whatever, I don't think things will come out. At least I think that's where I think you'll start having issues. And you know, I'm guilty of that. I think, you know, when you're young, you know, you think you're pretty invincible and everything. And, you know, I didn't really start. Yeah, I grew up in a Christian home, went to Christian school, college, everything. And of course, you know, when you graduate, you're kind of in this invincible mode. And it isn't until when things start to kind of, you know, not really work out, or things, you do tend to kind of question, and you kind of look around you, look and see, and then you just kind of find yourself coming back. And it is only until then is that when things start to, you know, you kind of not worry less, because you see things, you know, you kind of, you know, hey, you say, God, you know, I'm going to leave it up to you, and this is where it goes from there. And I'm going to, you know, your daily relationship with him is that when you start to, you know, kind of listen and hopefully have the faith that he guides you through wherever it is that you want to go. Anyways, that's kind of where I'm coming from there.
Thank you, Daisy. So good to hear your voice. Glad you're here, my friend. All right.
Thanks.
I just want to, Daisy, that was wonderful. You're right. You know, the idea of God wanting a relationship. And look, friendship is based on communication. And
Right.
prayer is, as I mentioned earlier, it's communication. And too often it's one-sided, and it's only, you know, done in, as Dale Carnegie pointed out, it's you know, done in times of extreme distress. But I wanted to introduce this, and I forgot to pull this up. I have it now, but the great English wit G.K. Chesterton, over a century ago, just a little over a century ago, said, "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried." Too many people reject Christianity, but that's because they don't understand it. They don't really understand it. And so it's been cast aside as being too difficult. Gandhi was quoted in this chapter too. And he knew the New Testament. He said he read from the New Testament every day. And someone asked him, "Why are you not a Christian?" He said, "Well, when I meet one, then I'll become one."
There you go. Thank you, Bob. See, Bob's just like a wealth of little tidbits of nuggets of information. This is great. Love you, Bob. All right, moving on. Got a couple more chapters we're going to cover here tonight. We're going into section 6 of the book, How to Keep from Worrying About Criticism. This is a big one, right? As we've all read, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. 6 Ghosts of Fear. What's number 2? Fear of criticism, right? Stops people from committing to a course of action, shuts down ambition, and all the other horrors of the fear of criticism. So anyway, chapter 20, remembering that no one ever kicks a dead dog. I love this. This is great. So the more important the dog is, the more satisfaction people get in kicking him. So have you been kicked? Well, you must have shown up as something worth kicking then. Isn't that great? A little bit of perspective there. So when you're kicked and criticized, remember that is often done because it gives the kicker a feeling of importance. Tragic, okay, but that's how some people feel okay about themselves, is by putting others down. It often means that you're accomplishing something and are worthy of attention. There's a saying that when you're being attacked, it's because you're right over the target, right? We could see this glaringly obvious in modern politics. Okay, so you can see how that happens, but also in in social situations, right? If somebody's getting a little too close to that tender spot, right, people get real defensive right there. Attack. So know that you're proving your worth there. I really enjoyed this quote. Vulgar people take huge delight in the faults and follies of great men. So, we have performers and we have critics, and even inside of us, we've got a performer and a critic, right? We can have our own little arguments in there. And in this chapter, or in the next one, he talks a little bit about that. But here was this guy who was being very critical of this president, Timothy Dwight, president of Yale. This guy is the loathing of God and man, and this would be the outcast, and is the worst thing ever. Almost sounds like a denunciation of Hitler, but it wasn't. It was a denunciation of Thomas Jefferson. So he had critics too. What American do you suppose was denounced as a hypocrite, an imposter, a little better than a murderer? George Washington. So don't think that you're going to be immune, from critics. I mean, here are people that did a lot of good in the world. It's almost impossible not to believe what you want to believe. So here's the confirmation bias, right? Which we've all experienced as well. But we can also see in an extreme sense, right? Here are people who refuse to look at facts. I'm speaking in modern times as well as historically here. Okay, so this was 1909. He was citing this one case. Okay, but right here in 2022, people that refuse to look at facts because it goes against their narrative or that which they want to believe. So how do you argue with that? I say you don't. In fact, I had a conversation recently, just thinking in a broader sense about, civics and society and politics and everything. I was talking to this guy who was an intelligence guy. He knows about extremist groups and stuff like that. And we got to talking a little bit about the let's say for example, here are the people of a country who want to overthrow the way of, let's say, free enterprise and free society, and bring in socialism, communism. And here's the murder of 100 million citizens in the 20th century alone by their own governments, right? These were people who dissented against the communist regime or whatever. And so at what point do people say, holy crap, we were wrong? Like, at what point do the people who were campaigning for communism say, hey, we screwed up? And according to the guy I was talking to, he said it's not until people personally experience pain, loss, right, that sort of thing, when it personally affects them, then they could see the errors of their ways. But up until that point, it's like, oh, well, too bad for you. You should have gotten with the program. So your family was murdered, right? That's what you get, right? You've been wrong this whole time. As long as they're not personally affected by it, they will stick with their narrative. That is friggin' scary, if you ask me. But that's what this guy said. I'm not saying that, it's 100% truth, but that was this guy who studies extremist groups. That was his assessment. Anyway, moving on. It says here, would Perry have been denounced if he had a desk job in the Navy Department? No, this guy was out in the field. He lost 8 toes. They froze off, all right? Would he have been denounced if he was sitting at a desk? No, he wouldn't have been important enough to have aroused jealousy. So consider that. Unjust criticism is often a disguised compliment. You're right over the target. Remember that no one ever kicks a dead dog. Any thoughts on this? None. Fair enough. Little validation for you there if you've been unjustly criticized. Next chapter, do this and criticism can't hurt you. When I hear someone cussing me now, I never turn my head to see who is talking. This is a guy who got a lot of criticism and just got immune to it. Okay, so he doesn't even look sideways, whatever, right? So now maybe old Gimlet Eye, am I even saying that right? Is it Gimlet or Gimlet, like Giblet? I don't know. All right, Gimlet Eye Butler. RG. Yeah, okay. So maybe he was too indifferent to criticism, right? Maybe he had gone too far, okay? But one thing is sure, most of us take the little jibes and javelins that are hurled at us far too seriously. So if we're going to say, well, you don't even listen to criticism, okay, well, maybe you've gone too far, but have I gone too far in the other direction? Habitually, have I allowed these little jibes and javelins, have I taken them too seriously? Yes, yes, yes. So if we need to see the other side of the pendulum, look at this guy, right? He's a yellow dog, a snake, and a skunk. Okay, great, whatever, say whatever. I don't even hear you anymore, right? So that kind of armor is something that I think many of us could afford to put on. And again, this isn't saying that we're perfect and we don't deserve criticism, because later in the chapter, okay, so later in the chapter, was it right here, where he talks about, taking constructive criticism. I realize now that people are not thinking about you and me or caring what is said about us. They are thinking about themselves. Before breakfast, after breakfast, and right on until 10 minutes past midnight. They would be 1,000 times more concerned about a slight headache of their own than they would about the news of your death or mine. Okay, that's a bit cynical. Okay, but is it false? Is he wrong? Let's be clear about this. I am not advocating ignoring all criticism. There's the quote I was thinking of. Okay, far from it. I'm talking about ignoring only unjust criticism. There's this concept of ad hominem attack, right? Ad hominem about the person. Okay, so attacking the character of the person rather than like their issue or policy, right? You can always tell when somebody's lost an argument because they'll resort to ad hominem attacks, typically, right? So rather than debating, facts or, what workability of this versus that theory, well, you are a rotten bastard. Okay, so now I just won the argument. Or what's a common one? Racist, right? That's how to avoid displaying that you've lost the argument. Just have an ad hominem attack. Doesn't have to make sense. Right? So we've all heard that 10 million times, to the point where, I could say a lot of us have just become immune to it. We know the playbook. It's the same nonsense. Whatever. It's unjust. Anyway, moving on. I really dug how he wrapped this up. That was the end of the chapter right here. So that motto is especially, so he's talking here about just laugh motto. So that motto is especially good when you are the victim of unjust criticism. You can answer the man who answers you back, but what can you say to the man who just laughs? In other words, if you know that there's no like argument that could be had, right? A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. They're going to believe whatever they're going to believe. There is no winning that argument. We're beyond like trying to reason with this person. Just laugh, right? This guy did. He laughed. He got thrown into the mud because the other people who were criticizing him got so frustrated with him. But he's fine. He just laughed. Lincoln might have broken under the strain of the Civil War if he hadn't learned the folly of trying to answer all his savage critics. He finally said, if I was to try and read, much less to answer all the attacks made on me, this shop might as well be closed for any other business. I do the very best I know how, the very best I can. This is really rich. Listen to this, guys. And I mean to keep on doing so until the end. If the end brings me out all right, then what is said against me won't matter. If the end brings me out wrong, then 10 angels swearing I was right would make no difference. There you go. Who's got some thoughts on this?
Once again, I hadn't read this chapter until the study tonight, and it reminded me a lot of a number of things about Lincoln. Lincoln is truly an admirable character for his character. All right, he took office at the most critical point in American history up to that time, and he had the perspective, I think, is probably the best word. He was criticized mercilessly by everybody. And there are anecdotes after anecdotes. I think some of them appear later in the book of how he dealt with criticism from within his own cabinet, and he had a sort of lighthearted vein about it. Like he said, when his Secretary of War criticized him for a decision and called him a damn fool, he said, well, I better check with him. He's usually right about things like that.
Well, so, yeah, go get counsel. Yeah, what's going on here?
Right. Yeah, if you think I'm a fool, tell me why you think I'm a fool. Why? Otherwise, you internalize everything and you end up not getting anything done. Okay? When you spend your time stewing about the criticism, or even worse, stewing about potential criticism, you're never going to accomplish a blessed thing. So criticism is just part of life. And granted, we're supposed to be our own harshest critics. So why worry about criticism from others because they don't know us as well as we know ourselves? Life's really too short. Take into account, just laugh. That's great advice. And proceed. Do the best you can.
Thank you, Bob. And of course, this next chapter and final chapter in this section is about being our own critic. Okay, that doesn't mean beating the crap out of ourselves, but recognizing our own folly. And so here to wrap up for tonight, fool things I have done. So he has a FTD list, fool things done list. All right. I used to blame my troubles. This is an indicator. Okay, so here's victimhood. I used to blame my troubles on other people, but as I have grown older and wiser, I hope, I realized that I myself, in the last analysis, am to blame for almost all my misfortunes. So who keeps showing up at the scene of the crime? All right, if we're going to be critical, let's look at our own actions. All right, it says here, I sometimes find that this weekly review, he's talking about reviewing the week, what he did right, what he did wrong. Okay, this weekly review makes me very unhappy. Sometimes I'm astonished by my own blunders. Of course, as the years have gone by, these blunders have become less frequent. This system of self-analysis, continued year after year, has done more for me than any other one thing I have ever attempted, says Mr. Howell, right? Now, maybe H.P. Howell borrowed his idea from Ben Franklin, only Franklin didn't wait till Saturday night. He gave himself a severe going over every night. So Franklin had 13 things that he felt were non-optimal conditions, habits of his own. Okay, and so he would focus on one per week, and then every night take inventory. So, Albert Hubbard, awesome stuff, always from Albert. He says, every man is a damn fool for at least 5 minutes every day. Wisdom consists in not exceeding that limit. Right. So here's where you were just quoting Lincoln. So Bob was talking about going to see Stanton. Damn fool. All right, well, let's go see Stanton. Because this guy knows stuff. He's not an idiot, right? If he's calling me an idiot, well, we need to have a conversation. You and I ought to welcome that kind of criticism too, for we can't even hope to be right more than 3 times out of 4. Huh. Okay, so that right by degree. Okay, because if you're wrong, let's say crossing the street, like it was an example Bob was talking about before. So if you're wrong 3 times out of 4, you're dead, right? So you need to be right more than that, depending on what we're talking about. At least that was all Theodore Roosevelt said he could hope for when he was in the White House. Einstein, the most profound thinker now living, confesses that his conclusions are wrong 99% of the time. Okay, so that's the scientific method. Okay, we could say, well, if you're wrong 99% of the time, that's still doing a lot better than, Tommy Edison with the light bulb, man, 10,000 times. Wrong. So, I mean, if we're doing something of note, if we're innovating and if we're expanding, then yeah, there's going to be non-optimal conditions that we can bring about because we don't have all the answers. So it's a bit of humility, a bit of honest self-appraisal, I think is what he's talking about here. So most of us have a pretty good opinion of ourselves as we are now, but in 40 years from now, we may look back and laugh at the persons we are today. Now, haven't we all seen where we've evolved? And hopefully you've looked back and you've been able to get some gratitude for how far you've come in various areas of life, right? So looking back on where we are right now, each of us individually, could we also imagine that we're going to look back on this 10 years hence and be like, wow, man, what the hell was I thinking? Okay, so we can give ourselves a break with that. We don't have to assert our rightness all the time. In fact, as Lao Tzu said, because here's another religion, here's Taoism for you, or I'm sorry, Zen. It says, those who speak do not know, those who know do not speak, right? So when I hear somebody who needs to assert their rightness all the time and defend their position, well, what do they know? I mean, if they really knew. Right. And with that, we come to the end of this section of the book. Let's keep a record of the fool things we have done and criticize ourselves. Since we can't hope to be perfect, let's do what E.H. Little did. Let's ask for unbiased, helpful, constructive criticism. So this guy Lewis, actually, when he would not get the sale, he would circle back and say, hey, can I get some criticism? What didn't you like about that sales presentation or about me or whatever? Don't pull no punches. Tell me what I did wrong. And then he became the president of the whole company. Anyway. Any thoughts on criticizing ourselves? Lindsay, you didn't get a word in here, girl. You got something to say?
I was just taking it all in.
Very good.
You dropped a lot of value. So I'm writing a lot of the time.
Good stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Bob, Daisy, thank you for being here. We're going to jump into part 7 next week. 6 ways to prevent fatigue and worry and keep your energy and spirits high. So 6 ways, that probably means there's 6 chapters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Read 6 chapters. I'll see you guys here next week. Thank you for being a part of our book study group. I get so much out of this. We'll see you guys again real soon.